Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Fafana. I'm Fafana Medise, and today we'll be talking about education, particularly education in Africa, navigating it, its innovations, its challenges, and obviously its successes and the future that is very exciting when it comes to education, tertiary education, particularly in Africa. And I'm joined by, I'd call you an expert maybe? Potential expert.
You could say that.
Yeah, Daruosh, you're here with us and we'll be talking about all things education, specifically engineering and tertiary education and the like. But could you please introduce yourself and tell us what it is that you've been doing?
Sure, thanks for having me. My name is Daruosh Ghodrati. I'm the Vice President of Administration and Finance at New College. And I've been with the college since 2010. And I've been particularly interested in education in the engineering and technical space. And I've been working with a team of experts in engineering, and I guess by default that makes me an expert. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, is there a particular reason why education was, I guess, you've been in this particular sector for such a long time, and specifically in Botswana?
Yes.
Is there a specific reason? Did it choose you? You chose it, or was it a family thing? Like this is what you have to do?
Yeah, I think it chose me. I grew up in Botswana. I was educated in Canada, and then I wanted to come back home to help with our company here. And New College has been in the education space. The New Era brand has been in the education space since 1996, and New College specifically since 2009. And so yeah, I've learned to enjoy the work that we do here. I've also learned to see the world from the viewpoint of what engineering education means for our region and for the world.
Yeah, I like the fact that you've had both experiences with, well, Africa, Botswana specifically, and obviously Canada. Is there a distinct difference that you've noticed with the two, with their approaches to education in general, and then dimming it down to engineering and the technology space as well?
Yeah, I think one significant difference is that in Canada, education is predominantly publicly funded, whereas in Botswana, many years ago, the government called for private sector support in education, and the likes of New York College and other institutions were born out of that need. And so I think that's a difference where we are able to focus on niche programs. We're able to address the specific needs of the country. In Canada, it's obviously a more advanced education system. It's not emerging in that sense as we are here. But there are learnings that we have taken from Canada, and I think there are learnings that Canada can take from Botswana in terms of providing access to education, or even the fact that we're able to give education grants and scholarships or sponsorships through the government. I think this is something that is really um, uh, what's the word? It's admirable here. Yes.
And it's something that I think oftentimes we take it for granted, especially here in Botswana, realizing that education is quote unquote free
Yeah.
in comparison to other countries. And when you look at the challenges that particularly tertiary education we face in tertiary education, what would you say that higher institutions face specifically in Botswana, and then maybe if you could broaden it to maybe sub-Saharan Africa as well? What particular challenges do you think we face? Is it technology? Is it access to internet and so on?
Mm-hmm. So we were talking about access to education and specifically funding or scholarships, and I think there is a flip side to that, where although the ministry and through the government of Botswana has provided most of its budget to education, but we are still losing out on access. I think less students are being sponsored, and the requirement for private households to pay for education is a demand and a struggle for many families. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to create scholarship programs. We've tried to create financial assistance programs to allow more students to enter the education space. I think also, being a technical college, being a hands-on educational establishment, we work with industry, and those relationships, I would say, are very critical to students' access to workplace to learning the right skills, the soft skills that they need. And so that type of relationship with industry needs to grow. It needs to expand. It needs to broaden in all aspects. And, we have many partners that we work with. We have students in various industry-based learning programs, from large corporations to small family-run businesses, but essentially that relationship has to grow with the industry and academia.
Yeah. I think another challenge, just thinking about it also, because I was watching something on a news channel, and it was speaking on, and it was particularly, it's a small college in South Africa, and they were paying students to enroll in their college. And then it turned out it wasn't accredited and so on. And I know that New Era is accredited by VQA, and I think you guys also have the Washington Accord and another accord particularly. So why could you just maybe tell us how you guys aligned yourself in terms of being accredited, and why it was important to have some sort of international accreditation of sorts as well?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of professional qualifications, I think the direction we're all going is to meet and align with international standards. For engineering degrees, that is the Washington Accord, and we've aligned all of our degree programs to that. There are other accords, the Sydney Accord, which is for 3-year or 4-year degree programs, and that is the intention, to make sure that we align with all of those accords. But as it goes for accreditation and professional registration, it's important that our students understand what those registrations mean, because there are different levels of registration. There's technician, there's technologist, and then there's engineer. And so our students can now register on all those 3 levels.
Right. There's been I think maybe since the Wakanda movie, Black Panther, there's just been this excitement about innovation and technology and in Africa and so on. And what could you say about that? I know that, we have been talking about New Era, but I'm sure there are other universities in Africa as well that are kind of leading the way when it comes to technology, and innovation.
Yeah.
So in what way can you say that it's, or not really in what way, but how can we highlight the importance of that being our focal point? I mean, when you talk about fintech, to be honest, I don't really know where to go, particularly in this country. Even maybe in Southern Africa, I'm not really sure where to go. Maybe Ghana, I know that there's something there going on, but why is it so important for us to really highlight technology and especially in Africa, and having being homegrown in that sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Africa in general is trying to keep up with the technological advances of the world, and I think some countries and some universities are really representing the continent well. I think for us, innovation starts with grassroots, looking at solutions to problems that we are facing, but also looking at how those problems are being faced across the borders. And so we are not just innovating for Botswana, but we should be innovating for the world, and we should be delivering solutions for the world. So when we look at, access to grants, when we look at collaborations with partnerships or other universities, these are the core things that we are focusing on. And New York College has been a research-driven institution since 2019. Our strategy for distinctive positioning pivots into that area where we are working with organizations, working with institutions. But I think we still have a long way to go in terms of adding value. We have started doing projects in areas like agriculture and electronics, embedded systems. These are areas where our faculty and some of our students are actually conducting research. And so in order for us to make those solutions come to life, commercialize them, even to that extent, making them profitable, licensing them, we need collaborations. And not only for funding and access, but also to ensure that the industry knows what we're doing and would actually say, we want this type of innovation.
Yeah, is this where we now need to appeal to government to say, we need help here, we can't be doing it on our own?
Yeah, I mean, government helps when they can, but I think when we talk about grants, there are a lot of other bodies or organizations that offer funding. You just have to align yourself with their requirements and make sure that your institution and your solutions are targeting their strategies and their goals.
And I know that a lot of students, especially when it comes to, I think maybe engineering, maybe, but like technology, they would like prefer to maybe go abroad to have more hands-on experience, and then there might be some sort of reluctance to come back home because now you have these skills, and you're wondering, okay, but where do I fit in the market? So what then do those soft skills now come into play that maybe I should now become an entrepreneur and, provide solutions, in that sense?
We'll tell them not to go. Stay here. We will educate you. We've aligned our programs internationally. We talked about the Washington Accord. Our students are accredited, or their qualifications are recognized in signatory countries. And there's about, don't quote me, but I think around 60 countries, advanced, developed countries where they could find jobs. The question is, are they going to meet the standards of that organization? And in terms of qualification, in terms of what they're learning, in terms of how we're training them, they will meet those qualifications, standards. And more so than that, I think, we do see our citizens here leaving and finding it hard to come back. And I think, once you've seen the world, I think it's hard for you to go back to wherever you're from. It's not a Botswana specific problem. But I think the government has done a lot to try to encourage citizens to come back and bring that talent and that knowledge back here. But now we get into, questions of the economy and politics and movement of people and goods and services, and that can have an effect on how we bring back people and encourage business outside of our country.
Absolutely. I'm also thinking about how the Intercontinental Africa Free Trade Agreement comes into play, where it's coming to trading freely within Africa, which I think is also very exciting.
Yeah.
And I think every industry plays a role here, which is also, again, exciting for, I guess, the students who are leaving tertiary education. But I think now it's quite interesting, especially post-COVID, that a lot of things are very digital, and some of the skill sets. I've even read an article about doctors. I think it was over 900 doctors who are unemployed. And unemployment is a very real issue.
Of course.
So then how can tertiary institutions, you're included, just really position themselves for students to be aware that you might not necessarily get a job? So in that sense, what's your fallback, when that happens? Because unemployment is very much rampant, in Botswana as well.
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about the key phrase, skills gap, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that, everyone is working towards. And when you look at access to jobs or, employability of professionals, yes, I mean, there are certain industries that are oversupplied and those that are undersupplied. And so what we've done is we've tried to, as New York College, target our programs and the credentials that we offer to industries that are in need, and also industries that tend to recruit internationally.
Yeah.
A lot of students that come to New York College want the degree. They want that prestigious qualification. And, I think our need, yes, is engineering degrees, but our major need is technicians and technologists. These are the people that are being hired from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, to work in all different industries, especially in the mines. And we're not getting a chance to employ our own citizens here with those types of qualifications. So yeah, it's a dangerous dance of finding that balance of, do we have the right skills? Do we have enough industry to hire those skills? And then on top of that, through our experience, we know that the industry has high expectations for the type of employees that they're looking for. And so soft skills, things like that, it's a question of who's responsible for training employees on that. Is it the companies? Is it the institutions? But I think, here comes that question of what are, more advanced or what are more mature economies doing? Are soft skills the responsibility of companies? I would say, for example, in Canada, it's not. In Canada, if you're employed, you're expected to hit the ground running. There's no opportunity to say, I need soft skills, right? Those are things that are learned through exposure, through school, and then that brings us to our last point with regards to this question, is that, is the basic education system garnishing and developing the type of skills that our students need when they enter tertiary? And I think we're moving in that direction. But you look at the whole generation of students that are coming through the college in the last 10 years, they've all been exposed to the same education system. And so you're kind of copy and pasting the same results. And so we need to change that. We need to improve our basic education system to meet the demands of the future workforce that's going to be needed.
Yeah. What I have for you, it's not necessarily questions, but I just would like to know your views in two parts. One, institutions or academic institutions, tertiary institutions that are allowing students to just pass through. And I think that's a very big concern. Not only in Botswana, but in South Africa, I'm aware of. I'm not really sure about any other African nations where it's a situation where a particular academic institution is known for its prestige, and it's a bit difficult to get through to to get a certain degree. And because of that, that should you get that particular degree or get enrolled in that program, that you're a creme de la creme. But now it's because maybe students are not doing as well in maybe in high school or secondary school. That's when it becomes a problem, and we're just letting everyone in. And something I'm very concerned about. I don't know what your view is on that. Should we call out these tertiary education institutions? What should be done? And then the second one being about organizations that are hiring people from outside and expect 20-year, 5-year experience for someone who just graduated but has the qualification.
Yeah. I'm going to give you my feedback on the last one. Yeah, if that's okay. So I think there are ways that institutions can work with industry to ensure that there is a constant flow of human capital, right?
Yeah.
That knowledge and skill or the competency that they're looking for is being developed. One way we do that is through industry-based learning. So, for example, New York College offers a 6-month industry-based learning program where every degree student is placed in a company for 6 months. And typically we screen those companies and we try to make sure that their work and the type of services or industry that they're in align with our programs. And they do the same. I mean, they want to know that we're sending, well-educated, well-competent students. And that's a way that we can create a flow of talent. One step further than that, we would look at apprenticeships. And, as New York College, we actually recommended this model. It's not really standardized per se, but what we want to do is work with a select few industry players to develop an apprenticeship program. This would mean that upon graduation, they would need to work for 2 years with a company, not, let's say, not under a full salary, but, let's say 50 or 60 or 70% of what that person will be getting. And through that apprenticeship program, they would learn the job skills that they need to actually be successful. For example, in Canada and Australia, also in some places in Europe like Germany, the apprenticeship program is standardized in the sense where if you're an electrician, if you're a plumber, if you're a roofing expert, or any kind of trade or any kind of vocational skill, technical skill, you would need that 2-year apprenticeship where your mentor would then approve your mentorship, and then you become licensed through that approach. And so that's something that we would love to do here. And I think the ERB is doing a great job of keeping standards.
The ERB being?
Oh, the Engineers Registration Board of Botswana. But we would need to see further standards developed, and having an apprenticeship program like this would put a great opportunity for students, but on the flip side, would also put strain on the industry, because if they have to take in all these apprentices, they need to have that. But I think it would also provide an opportunity for them to have more affordable labor and for there to be a continuous learning for our future employees in the economy. To your first point, yeah, I think this is a problem. In general, there are various standards that institutions have to abide by. First, there's the standards of the regulatory body. Then there's the standards of their professional bodies. Um, and then, of course, their own standards. And so if an institution says that we take in students at this entry point, or we graduate them with this GPA, and they're not doing that, well, I would say plain and simple, they're not credible. And so during COVID, I mean, even some of the top universities were considering exempting students from writing exams. They were exempting students from, I think it was either New York or California that received a request for law students not having to write the bar for that particular year. And so there was exceptions made, but I think um, that was a unique situation. In general, we should not be lowering our standards just to bring in more students, or for lack of a better word, incentivizing students to come to an institution, through giveaways. I think that the credibility and the integrity are heavily questioned in that situation.
Yeah, and then the employer then is shocked
Yeah,
one day.
yeah,
And I then, speaking of the employability skills or ability of a student, I think this one really falls. And yes, while we say that, the tertiary institutions should prepare students, but I think it also falls a lot on the students so that they are quote unquote employable. And is that something that you guys teach, or, you encourage, or what would you say to students particularly to say that it's very important for you to have those soft skills to be able to be a good communicator, to be able to understand and speak to your boss and know how to relate with your coworkers as well?
yes. Um, I think all in all, we try to deliver those soft skills through our engagement with students. We have had curated programs where we've tried to expand on those types of skills. But I think, like any institution, focusing on soft skills as a course, or as a workshop, a lot of institutions are doing that, and we're trying to develop them. And I think some industries or some programs might be better suited to develop those types of soft skills. But in general, I think when it comes to engineers and technicians, these are individuals who work with their hands.
Yeah.
They typically work, either individual or sometimes with teams, and the business savviness, negotiation skills, navigating difficult situations. These are things that they will develop and learn through work experience. And so I think it's a bit unreasonable for companies to say, well, you don't have 95% of the checklist that we want,
Yeah.
so we're going to cut you out. But I think the economy dictates that approach. If there isn't enough skill to hire, and there isn't enough talent to hire, then your expectations are lowered, your standards are lowered. But if everyone is coming out with great skills and great opportunities, then that's when the market and the competitiveness starts to emerge.
Yeah. I have been curious about how the same way in which it's easy for Botswana to go overseas and go to university overseas, how can universities here as well encourage the same type of thing? So, but it may not be the same, but we do have quality education, and you can have the full on African experience with having education here. So how can tertiary education institutions here locally in Botswana, or even just in different parts of Africa, position themselves to welcome students from all over
Yeah.
to enroll in their schools as well?
Yeah, I think in our experience, having student exchange programs,
Yeah.
faculty exchange programs, collaborations on research. These are some of the ways that we've engaged with, overseas institutions or even regional institutions. I think overall, I know there's been studies about how many international students come to Botswana to study, and I think the University of Botswana takes the cake on that. But other institutions have been able to engage with, other countries through embassies to attract students. but we are not importing students for education here. And I think one of the reasons is that, regionally and even globally, maybe our education system is not at the level that would attract, like if you look at, for example, the US or Canada, where they attract, thousands and thousands of students every year. Those systems are reputable. And so we are working towards that as a nation, as an institution. New York College needs to expand on its partnerships with academic institutions, and specifically when it comes to research and student exchange.
Yeah, and speaking of research, I don't know, has there been any groundbreaking research? I mean, I know we talk a lot. India, there's always some groundbreaking research program. Or I know Ghana as well, Kenya as well is very big on that, especially when it comes to technology and innovation. I don't know if there's any in Botswana that you can highlight or from the school itself, that have been kind of noteworthy and people are like, it's kind of brought attention to the country as well.
I think there has been some. What I know is that our neighbors to the south are very instrumental in global research. I know there were two research projects that came to my mind. One was with I think these were in areas of sustainability, but also in data collection and processing. I think it was UCT, University of Limpopo, and then there was a bilateral agreement between South Africa and the Netherlands that involved universities and industry, and they were collecting data to facilitate a large radio, I think it was called a radio projector or radio scope. And so this will collect data, and they'll manage that data, process that data. And so it requires, a relationship between several bodies or organizations. And I think that was quite interesting. But in terms of in Botswana, I mean, we've been doing research at the college in areas of agriculture. We've had students come up with smart technologies that would streamline agriculture operations, that would also make it easier for farmers to monitor and operate their farms from a distance. So, I know there are a lot of individuals who live in the city in Ghodrati and they have farms outside, and they rely on their farm boys, or they have to travel every weekend just to check on things. And some of our students in their third year and fourth years, they came up with some pretty interesting technologies, and they did this not using fancy equipment. They did this using our STEM kits. New York College started an initiative in 2018 where we started a STEM program that was focused on transitioning our first year students, allowing them to understand the practical knowledge of components and circuitry. And so they had the theory, they had the knowledge in school. When they finished Form 5, they came here and they were completely bewildered by the equipment in the labs. And on top of that, I think our faculty was also a bit reluctant to allow them to work with the equipment. They said, you don't know what you're doing. And so there is a demonstration aspect. There is an aspect of observation, learning through observation. But I think they were hungry to use their hands and to come up with prototypes and learn how to innovate. And so our STEM program actually made that possible. And so now we're using that STEM program in primary schools and secondary schools as well. But all in all, I think the innovations that they came up with in agriculture were using those STEM kits. And those STEM kits are great for ages, in primary and secondary. And we've had some more sophisticated research done. I mentioned in electronics and embedded systems. We had a traffic light system which uses infrared. I'm not so technical on it, but I think these are research projects that have gotten interest. But the question is now, how do we move forward with it? There was another research that was done by our construction department where they built a sustainable home model using just sand and some kind of durable outdoor canvas. I think it was hemp, made of hemp. But essentially they were able to build a sustainable home, and that house is cost effective. It doesn't require special skill, and it uses the resources that we live around. We have tons of sand in Botswana. So there are different projects that we've done, and I think it's important that, the industry works with us to make sure that they're interested in the types of projects, because the research and the money that goes into it would go to waste if it didn't come to fruition. And I'm not saying that every research must be a viable option, but the ones that are going to support this economy and especially the region are the ones that require our full attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm appreciating just from our conversation that capacity-wise, we do have the capacity to carry on various projects and really be innovative in solving problems. And now with this, not really now, but there's just been this growing interest in investing in Africa, and there's a lot going on in Botswana as well. There's just summit after summit after summit. So I think just from a capacity point of view, it's showing that we do have the capacity to carry on certain projects, and we don't necessarily need to have outside help in that sense. And then secondly, I also appreciate the STEM kids as well, because it bridges the gap from tertiary, from secondary or high school and then to tertiary, because usually there's that little gap there where it's like, okay, if I don't go to a private school, I don't have access to certain technology.
Right.
And then when I do get to tertiary school, I'm a bit confused, and I'm seeing other students progressing and others aren't. So STEM kids, is it available? Does everyone have access to it in Botswana, or is it something you enroll in?
Yes. So our STEM program has been delivered to schools. It's been delivered to communities and individuals as well. So you could engage with us as an institution that's looking to bridge that gap. You can engage with us as a school that's looking to introduce STEM education into your curriculum. And we do that in two ways. So we have our recommended solution, which is where we set up a lab in your school. We train your teachers on how to deliver the lesson plans. And then from there, we ask you to incorporate that into your timetable. And so just like you would have a computer lab or a science lab timetable, you would have a timetable for STEM lab. And then what we do is we take your curriculum in school and we align it with the curriculum of our STEM program. So as students are learning theory in class, you have projects which are aligned with those concepts. And so students can immediately see the manifestation of those theories and concepts come to life. They can start to work on those projects, they can start to prototype, and once they've gone through that program, they have enough knowledge and competency to start innovating and creating ideas and solutions. And so that's one of the main components of how we deliver STEM in schools. We also have a STEM club, which is more of an extracurricular, and that's for schools that are maybe not ready to take on the implementation of STEM into their curriculum and into their timetable, and want something to be educational and also accessible. But really, where STEM is going and where schools should be looking at is ensuring that they have STEM into their timetable, into their day-to-day routine, and that practical knowledge is what we are delivering on. Aside from that, we are teaching other essential skills like analytical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, because our model is not a instructional model. It's more open-ended. It's more of a DIY, do-it-yourself. So there is an instructor or a facilitator that's there to guide the students. But once they've gone past the first few projects, and once they've learned the role or the purpose of the components and how they interact with each other, which is the learning part, then they can start to do it themselves. They start to innovate. They start to create ideas and projects, and they work with their teammates. They work with students in their class, and this enables so much creativity and collaboration to rise from it.
Absolutely. And when you think of the emerging trends when it comes to education, higher education in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa specifically, is it now everyone's interested in going digital? So I know digital marketing is such a thing now.
Yes.
I'm in it. But I mean, I didn't think it'd be taken that seriously. But these are just all things technology. Is that where you see a lot of us leaning towards? Or you see that maybe the traditional degree programs are still very much in fashion. Everyone wants to be a doctor or an engineer.
Yeah,
And I see a lot of people also leaning towards creative spaces as well.
definitely. I think as a starting point, as institutions, we need to ensure that we are offering programs that are delivered through, newer pedagogy, right? Using, everyone always says e-learning platforms and digital learning platforms, and I think, that is just the baseline. Like we need to find ways to center our delivery around students, right? To look at what it means to be a student in today's world and what it means to be a student in the future. And so using alternative pedagogies, I think the term they use is flipped classroom or project-based learning. These are areas that we need to work on as institutions. I know certain countries like Scandinavian countries like Finland and not so much Sweden, but I think Finland, they're really ahead of the game when it comes to education. Their whole system is based on project-based learning, and when they delivered that new curriculum and the new approach to learning, I think they lost about 30% of their teaching workforce nationally because they were not buying into it. But Finland didn't care. They believe in what they're doing, and I think as institutions we have to provide options for learning, different pathways for learning, and that starts again from basic education. You have schools that are committed just to coding. You have schools that are committed just to the creative arts, right? And so we have to make sure that we facilitate a multi-learner approach, and then also continue looking at partnerships because there are reputable institutions out there that are doing things right, which we can learn from, we can partner with, and make sure that we can deliver some of those opportunities here to our students.
Absolutely. And in closing, I just really want to know from your view and your experience. I mean, 15 years in the space, it's quite some time. I was reading the meaning of education, and it's derived from a Latin term, which means to lead forth or bring out. And I think that sometimes, as students and maybe as lecturers, as academic institutions, we kind of forget that, because we focus so much on the business of education instead of actually bringing out the potential and bringing out the idea of a holistic student.
Yes.
And when you realize maybe, like, let's say in the US, for example, you have you find a doctor who's also a very brilliant photographer.
Right.
And it's like education or just the degree was to show that they're scalable or they are teachable rather.
Yes.
And then teachable in other things, you need to be more than just what you are. You need to be beyond your degree as well. So, just me saying that, like, what kind of comes in your mind when you think of, okay, cool, what are we bringing out as academic institutions? What are we leading forth? Because it's very important to look at it in that sense as opposed to just looking at the business side of things.
Yeah, I think this is a part of your question is a philosophical debate that basically asks us, is things like education, like healthcare, should that be privatized? Should that be a public service where, money or revenue is not the driving factor? And I think there is that possibility in more of mature economies. But then you look at other mature economies like the US where, healthcare is privatized, right? People can't afford $50 a month or the equivalent of 500 pula a month for healthcare. And the same goes here. But, we have public hospitals here. We have public clinics at least. But looking at education, I think, there are great examples of countries that have privatized education and that are leading research, that are leading standards. And a country like Botswana has great public institutions that are well funded, right? And then you have private institutions which are also well funded, and we're trying to also compete for this market share. But rather than compete, I think we should collaborate because we're all after the same intention, which is to educate and create skills gaps. But the underlying um, the underlying issue is that money drives
Yeah.
our salaries, our programs, and maintaining our campuses, maintaining our buildings. And so if you're not receiving public funding, you're relying on tuition, which is what a lot of private institutions do here. And so we need to make sure that we have revenue coming in so that we can deliver our programs, we can deliver our resources,
Yeah.
because we don't have that benefit of having public funding. I don't know if I covered your question. There was a part of it that I think I missed.
Yeah, just in terms of bringing out like the student-centric part of it.
Oh, yes. I think when you look at that example you gave of a doctor who's also a photographer, or you have an engineer who's a marketing professional, or who knows how to do social media, I think the way, we have this mindset change campaign that's going on, and I think that's a big part of it, is that, we're focused on just one-dimensional result, whereas we should be looking at being better people, better humans, right, and better professionals. And I think that comes with time. It comes with exposure,
Yes.
right? I think exposure is an area and that's why, it's important for citizens, for Botswana, to be able to leave and come back, because often this is their home. This is where they're going to dedicate their energy to. But we may lose some, but ultimately, if we're not allowing exposure to take place, if we're not letting people come in, if we're not letting people go out, we will ultimately advance and grow slower.
Yeah, absolutely. That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I think more than anything, keywords being collaboration. And like it says, the saying goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Daruosh, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
And I think we'll probably have a part 2. Who knows? And thank you all so much for joining. If you have a comment, please let us know. Remember to like and comment and to share and to subscribe. See you next time.